Introduction to Ludwig Wittgenstein. Ludwig Wittgenstein was one of the most influential philosophers of the 20th century. Born in Vienna in 1889, he initially studied engineering before turning to philosophy under the guidance of Bertrand Russell at the University of Cambridge. His philosophical career is usually divided into two phases: the early Wittgenstein of the Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus and the later Wittgenstein of philosophical investigation. Both phases profoundly transform the study of language, logic, and philosophy. Why Wittgenstein matters? Wittgenstein believed that many philosophical problems arise from misunderstanding about language. Instead of asking traditional metaphysical questions, he examined how words function and how language shape our understanding of reality. His work influenced analytic philosophy, linguistics, psychology, religion, studies, and even computer science. Few philosophers have changed the direction of philosophical inquiry as dramatically as Wittgenstein. The connection between language and reality. In his early philosophy, Wittgenstein argued that language and reality share a common logical structure. Language is not merely a collection of sound or symbols, it represents the world. Just as a map depicts a territory, meaningful language depicts reality. To understand language, therefore, we must understand the structure of the world that language attempts to describe. The limits of language. Wittgenstein famously wrote, "The limit of my language means the limit of my world." He did not mean that reality ceased to exist beyond language. Rather, he meant that our ability to meaningfully discuss and describe reality depend upon the resource of language. What cannot be clearly expressed cannot become a subject of meaningful philosophical discourse. What can be said and what must be shown? According to early Wittgenstein, some things can be stated through proposition, while others can only be shown. Logical form, ethical value, aesthetic, and mystical experiences, it cannot be adequately expressed through factual language. This aspect of life reveal themselves indirectly rather than through straightforward description. The world is the totality of fact. The opening sentence of the Tractatus declared that the world is everything that is the case. Wittgenstein emphasized that the world is not merely a collection of things. Instead, it is the totality of fact. Fact are situation or state of affair that exist in reality. Philosophy must therefore focus on how facts are represented in language. Understanding facts. A fact is not simply an object. For example, a table by itself is an object. But the book is on the table is a fact because it describes a relationship between objects. Facts are structured combination of objects. Language becomes meaningful when it mirrors this structure and relationship accurately. Object as the building blocks of reality. Wittgenstein regarded object as the fundamental constituent of the world. Objects are simple entities that combine to form state of affairs. Although we may never directly identify all these simple objects, they serve as the logical foundation of reality. Just as atoms are once thought to be the basic unit of matter, objects function as the basic unit of Wittgenstein logical universe. State of affairs. Objects do not exist in isolation. They combine in specific ways to create state of affairs. Some combinations are possible, while others are not. The existence or non-existence of this state of affair determines whether a proposition is true or false. Thus, reality possesses a logical structure that language seeks to capture. What are names? In the Tractatus, names are the simplest element of language. A name stands for an object in reality. Just as objects are the basic component of the world, names are the basic component of language. The connection between names and object forms the foundation of meaningful representation. The role of names in meaning. Names gain significance because they refer to object. However, names alone do not express fact. Simply listing names such as book, table, and room tell us very little. Meaningful communication arises when names are arranged into propositions that depict relation among objects. What is proposition? A proposition is a meaningful statement that represents a possible state of affair. For example, the book is on the table. Present a picture of reality. If reality corresponds to the proposition, it is true. If not, it is false. The proposition and the fact share the same logical form. Elementary proposition. Wittgenstein believed that complex statement can be broken down into simpler components called elementary proposition. This elementary proposition correspond directly to basic state of affairs in reality. They are logically independent. The truth of one does not automatically determine the truth of another. Through combination of elementary proposition, language can describe the immense complexity of the world. Truth and logical structure. The truth of a proposition depends on whether the state of affair is depicted actually exists. Language functions like model of reality. If the arrangement within the proposition matches the arrangement in the world, the proposition is true. Thus, meaning, truth, and reality are interconnected through logical structure. Logic as the framework of representation. Logic does not describe fact. Rather, it provides the framework that makes representation possible. According to Wittgenstein, logical form is shared by both language and reality. Because this form is presupposed in every meaningful statement, it cannot itself be meaningfully described. It can only be shown through the functioning of language. The central idea of picture theory. The picture theory is one of the most famous doctrines of Tractatus. Wittgenstein argued that a proposition is like a picture of reality. Just as a photograph represents a sense through the arrangement of visual elements, a proposition represents a fact through the arrangement of linguistic elements. How picture represent reality? Consider a map of city. The map does not physically resemble every building or street, but it shares a structural relationship with the city. Likewise, language does not need to resemble reality visually. It only needs to mirror reality's logical structure. This structure correspondence allows language to represent the world. Logical form and representation. The possibility of representation depends on logical form. Both the proposition and the fact possess the same underlying structure. Because of this shared form, language can function as a model of reality. Without logical form, meaningful communication would be impossible. Truth as correspondence. Within the picture theory, a proposition is true when the situation is portrayed actually exists. If the depicted state of affair does not exist, the proposition is false. Therefore, proposition function as logical picture that can be compared with reality to determine their truth value. Significance of picture theory. The picture theory attempts to explain how language can meaningfully connect with the world. Although Wittgenstein later abandoned many aspects of this theory, it remained one of the most influential contributions to analytic philosophy and the philosophy of language. Transition to later philosophy. In his work, especially philosophical investigation, Wittgenstein rejected many assumptions of the Tractatus. He shifted attention from logical structure to everyday language. Instead of asking how language pictures reality, he examined how language is actually used in human life. What is a private language? A private language would be a language understood by only one individual. referring exclusively to their private experiences. Imagine creating words that describe sensation only you can know and that no one else can understand. Wittgenstein questioned whether such a language could genuinely exist. The problem of verification. If a word refers to a completely private sensation, how can one know whether it is being used correctly? There is no public standard of correctness. Without shared criteria, the distinction between using a word correctly and merely thinking one is using it correctly disappear. This creates a fundamental problem of private language. Language requires public rules. Wittgenstein argued that language functions through rules shared within a community. Meaning depends on practice that can be publicly checked and understood. A language accessible only to a single individual would lack the standard necessary for meaningful communication. Implication of the private language argument. The critique of private language challenged traditional ideas about the mind and consciousness. It suggests that meaning is not grounded in purely private mental experience. Instead, meaning emerges from participation in social practice and shared form of life. The shift from reference to use. The early Wittgenstein emphasized representation and logical structure. The later Wittgenstein argued that meaning is not determined primarily by reference. Instead, the meaning of a word depends on how it is used within a particular context. His famous principle is meaning is use. Words as tools. Wittgenstein compared words to the tools in a toolbox. Just as hammer, screwdriver, and rulers perform different functions, words perform different rules within language. There is no single essence common to all words. Their significance depends on purpose they serve in the human activity. Understanding through practice. To understand a word, we must examine how people actually employ it. Dictionaries can provide definition, but genuine understanding comes from observing uses in real situations. Language is not a static system of labels. It is dynamic human practice. What are forms of life? Wittgenstein introduced the concept of forms of life to explain the background that makes language meaningful. A form of life consists of the shared custom, practice, institution, and ways of acting that characterize a community. Language gains significance within this broader pattern of human activity. Language embedded in human life. Words do not acquire meaning in isolation. They are woven into social interaction, cultural tradition, and practical activities. Asking a question, giving an order, telling a joke, or praying all belong to different forms of life. Understanding language therefore requires understanding the human context in which it operates. Language games. To explain how language functions, Wittgenstein introduced the concept of language game. A language game is any activity involving language governed by particular rules. Giving command, making promise, and asking questions, telling stories, or conducting scientific research are all examples of different language games. Each game has its own standard and purpose. Family resemblance. Wittgenstein observed that many concepts cannot be defined by a single common essence. Instead, they are connected through what he called family resemblance. Just as members of a family may share overlapping features without possessing one identical characteristic, concepts often exhibit network of similarities rather than strict definition. Forms of life and understanding. Different forms of life generate different ways of understanding the world. Scientific discourse, religious worship, legal proceeding, and artistic expression all operate according to distinct language games. Misunderstanding often occur when the rules of one language game are wrongly imposed upon another. Significance of forms of life. The concept of forms of life emphasizes that meaning is rooted in human practice rather than abstract logical structure. Language is not detached from life. It is an activity embedded within culture, history, and social interaction. This insight became one of the foundations of later analytic philosophy. Religion and language. Although Wittgenstein did not explicitly formulate a theory called Wittgensteinian Fideism, many philosophers draw inspiration from his later philosophy to interpret religious belief. They argue that religious language should not be judged solely by scientific or empirical standards because it belongs to a different language game. Understanding religious discourse. According to this interpretation, statements about God, prayer, faith, and salvation function within a particular religious form of life. Their meaning emerge from religious practice and experiences rather than from scientific verification. Religious language is therefore understood according to its own internal logic. Faith and rationality. Wittgenstein Fideists do not necessarily reject reason. Rather, they argue that religious belief cannot be reduced to scientific hypotheses. Faith involves commitment, worship, and moral transformation, and participation in a religious community. This dimension cannot be fully captured by empirical testing alone. Criticism of Wittgensteinian Fideism. Critics argue that this approach may isolate religion from rational criticism. If religious beliefs are treated as belonging entirely to a separate language game, it's become difficult to evaluate their truth or falsity. Supporters, however, maintain that the approach protects religion from inappropriate standard of assessment. Its influence, whether accepted or rejected, Wittgensteinian Fideism significantly influenced 20th century philosophy of religion. Thinkers inspired by Wittgenstein sought to understand religious belief as a distinctive human practice rather than merely a set of theoretical claims about the world. Background of Uncertainty. Uncertainty was one of Wittgenstein's final works, published after his death in 1951. The book emerged from his reflection on skepticism, particularly discussion inspired by the philosopher G.E. Moore. Wittgenstein examined what it means to claim knowledge and certainty. The problem of skepticism. Philosophical skeptics question whether we can know anything with certainty. They ask whether the external world truly exists or whether our perception might be deceived. Wittgenstein believed that such skepticism misunderstands how knowledge actually functions in everyday life. Moore common sense response. Moore famously held up his hand and declared, "Here is one hand and here is another," claiming this proved the existence of the external world. Wittgenstein admired Moore's confidence but argued that Moore misunderstood the nature of certainty. Some beliefs are not ordinary items of knowledge that require proof. Hinge proposition. Wittgenstein introduced the idea of hinge proposition. These are basic assumptions that underlie our entire system of thought. Examples include beliefs such as the world has existed before I was born or I have a body. We normally do not verify this belief because they form the framework within which verification occurs. The door hinge analogy. Just as a door rooted on hinges, our inquiries and doubt operate upon unquestioned assumption. If every belief are doubted simultaneously, meaningful investigation would become impossible. Certain foundational commitments must remain in place for knowledge and communication to function. Certainty as practice. For Wittgenstein, certainty is not always a matter of possessing conclusive evidence. Often it is reflected in how we act. Our confidence in the existence of the world, other people, and everyday object is shown through our behavior. Certainty is woven into our practice and form of life. Significance of uncertainty. Uncertainty represents the culmination of Wittgenstein later philosophy. It shifts attention away from abstract theories of knowledge and towards the practical conditions that make knowledge possible. The work continued to influence debate in epistemology, skepticism, and philosophy of mind. The journey of Wittgenstein thought. Wittgenstein philosophy evolved dramatically over time. The early Wittgenstein sought to uncover the logical structure connecting language and reality. The later Wittgenstein emphasized language as a social practice embedded within form of life. Despite their differences, both phases sought to dissolve philosophical confusion. Lasting contribution. His theories of language, meaning, private language, language games, and certainty transformed 20th century philosophy. Wittgenstein demonstrated that many philosophical puzzles emerge not from hidden mysteries in reality, but from misunderstanding about how language functions. Influence across discipline. Beyond philosophy, Wittgenstein's ideas influence linguistics, psychology, religious studies, anthropology, education, and cognitive science. His work continued to inspire scholars who investigate the relationship between language, thought, and human experience. Wittgenstein once suggested that philosophy should show the fly the way out of the fly bottle. Rather than constructing grand metaphysical systems, he sought to free us from conceptual confusion. His legacy endured as a reminder that understanding language is often the key to understanding ourselves and the world we inhabit. If you are still watching, I hope you are finding this content useful. Please like and share this video, subscribe to the channel and share your thought in the comment. Your support motivates me to create even more content like this.